A person goes missing and the search ends with no answers. Years pass and everyone assumes they're gone forever, until they suddenly return. Some come back with unbelievable stories, others say almost nothing. In this video, we'll explore 5 more real cases where people vanished without a trace, only to reappear years later. These are not simple disappearances, they are mysteries that twist and turn, leaving behind more questions than answers. It was August 28, 1984, in Amstetten, Austria. 18-year-old Elisabeth Fritzl had disappeared from her family's home. Her parents, Josef and Rosemarie Fritzl, said she had run away before, but this time felt different. Weeks later, a letter arrived in her handwriting. She claimed she had joined a religious group and didn't want to be found. Her mother believed it, neighbors believed it. But in reality, Elisabeth had been taken by her own father and hidden just beneath the house. For the next 24 years, she would be locked in a soundproof basement with no windows under his complete control. Rosemarie had married Joseph in the 1950s when she was 17 and he was 21. From the start, Joseph controlled everything, from finances to family decisions. He often belittled Rosemarie in public. They went on to have 7 children, 4 daughters and 3 sons, one of them being Elisabeth. Joseph's past was troubling. In 1967, he was convicted of attacking a young woman and served 18 months in prison. Despite this, he remained the dominant figure in the household. Rosemarie's sister despised him and never understood why Rosemarie stayed. Elisabeth had tried to leave home before. At 17, she was caught by police and brought back. When she disappeared again at 18, Joseph told everyone she had joined a cult. He forced her to write letters to back up his story, mailing them from other towns. The truth was that Joseph had been preparing for years. In the 1970s, he built a hidden bunker under the house. It had thick walls, a steel door, and an electronic lock. No one else was allowed inside. On the day Elisabeth vanished, Joseph lured her into the basement under the pretense of helping him with a project. He overpowered her and locked her inside. She was completely alone for 5 years. Then, in 1988, she gave birth to her first child, the first of 7 children she would have while in captivity. 3 of them stayed with her underground. 3 were raised upstairs by Joseph and Rosemarie, who believed they had been abandoned at the doorstep. 1 baby died shortly after birth, and Joseph disposed of the body himself. Joseph maintained control through fear. He told those in the basement the door was electrified and that poisonous gas would be released if they tried to escape. The children underground had never seen sunlight, attended school, or experienced life outside. Everything changed in 2008 when Kirsten, Elisabeth's oldest child underground, became critically ill. Joseph finally agreed to take her to the hospital, bringing along a note supposedly from her mother. Staff grew suspicious when they found Kirsten had no records or history. Authorities appealed on TV for her mother to come forward. Seeing this, Elisabeth convinced Joseph to bring her and 2 of her children out briefly. At the hospital, the police separated her from Joseph. She agreed to tell her story on the condition that she would never have to see him again. She revealed 24 years of captivity and the births of her children. Joseph was arrested and in 2009 sentenced to life in prison. Rosemarie was found to have had no knowledge of the situation. Elisabeth and her 6 surviving children were moved to a protected location known as Village X. The 3 who grew up underground had to learn how to live outside for the first time. Elisabeth eventually began a quiet life with her partner, Thomas Wagner, a former bodyguard. Joseph, now in his 90s, remains in prison. His request to reunite with family has gone unanswered. For 8,516 days, Elisabeth was hidden just meters away from her family, a secret buried in concrete beneath their feet. It was June 21, 1977 in Hauula, Hawaii. Mark Barnes had just come home from work. His partner, Charlotte Moriarty, had taken their 6-month-old son, Mark's Panama Moriarty Barnes, out for a short walk. But minutes turned into hours. Hours became days, and Charlotte never came back. At first, Mark thought it was something small. Maybe she stopped to see a friend or lost track of time. But as days passed with no sign of Charlotte or their baby, fear set in. He contacted the police and reported them missing. For the next 1.5 years, Mark searched the island. He checked hospitals, spoke to strangers, and drove through neighborhoods hoping for a lead. Nothing turned up. But behind the scenes, something unusual had already happened. Shortly after leaving home, Charlotte went to the house of a stranger. She was calm, not in distress. She gave the person, and later the police, a fake name. She also gave a false name and birth date for her baby. With no way to verify their real identities, authorities treated the child as abandoned. Charlotte was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, but within days she left and vanished. She never contacted Mark, never returned for her son, and has never been seen since. The baby was declared a ward of the state and placed in an orphanage about 30 miles away. His real name and family ties were lost under the false identity Charlotte had given. 3 years later, a couple from New Jersey, Steve and Pat Carter, visited the orphanage. They met a healthy 4-year-old boy with no known past. They adopted him, naming him Steve Carter. Steve grew up in a loving, stable home in New Jersey. He became a successful salesman in Philadelphia, but questions about his past stayed with him, like why his birth certificate had been issued over a year after he was born and why there were no details about his life before adoption. In 2011, Steve heard the news story of Carlina White, who discovered she'd been taken as a baby after seeing her photo on a missing children's website. The story hit him hard. That same day, he went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. He searched Hawaii, male, and missing 34 years. One result stopped him cold: a photo of a 6-month-old baby missing since 1977, alongside an age-progressed image. The face looked just like his. He showed it to a friend, who told him that it was him and that he should call the police. Steve contacted Honolulu police and explained everything. They requested a DNA test, which was done in February 2011. Months later, the results confirmed it. He was Mark's Panama Moriarty Barnes, missing for 34 years without knowing it. Through this, Steve learned his full story: how his mother had lied about their identities before disappearing, causing him to lose all contact with his family. In early 2012, Steve called his half-sister Jennifer Monheimer, who had been 8 when he disappeared. She had believed he and their mother were gone forever, but had convinced Hawaii authorities to reopen the case, leading to his photo appearing online. Steve also contacted his father, Mark Barnes, now in California. Mark was stunned. They spoke by phone but never met in person before Mark passed away in 2023. Charlotte remains missing. Some think she went to East Asia. Others believe she wanted a new life. Steve feels no anger toward her, saying she struggled and often acted on impulse. Steve remains deeply grateful to the Carters, calling them his parents. His story has given hope to other families of missing children. For Steve, the search for answers ended with one discovery: that the life he'd always known began with a name that wasn't his and a truth hidden for decades. It was March 27, 2017 in Rio Branco Acre, Brazil. Bruno de Melo Silva Borges, a 25-year-old psychology student, had lunch with his family that day. His parents had just returned from vacation. They talked, ate, and went about their day. Later, his father dropped him off at a corner near their home. Bruno walked away carrying only a backpack and the hard drive from his computer. No money, no ID, no clear destination. That was the last time his family saw him. Bruno never returned that night. His phone was off, no messages. The next day, his parents entered his locked room for the first time in weeks and found something shocking. The room had been completely transformed. The furniture was gone. The walls, ceiling, and floor were covered in carefully organized, encrypted writings. In the center stood a nearly 2-meter-tall statue of 16th-century philosopher Giordano Bruno, whom Bruno admired. 14 handwritten books, all encrypted, were arranged in the room, 8 stacked neatly, the rest copied onto the walls. Roman numerals marked each volume. A large painting showed Bruno being touched on the forehead by what appeared to be an extraterrestrial being, surrounded by strange symbols. Some writings contained quotes in Portuguese from philosophers, writers, and the Bible. Most were unreadable, unless you knew the code. Bruno left that too, adapted from a scout manual. His parents had no idea he had been working on this. Bruno had always been curious, drawn to complex books. He studied administration, law, and psychology, but never finished a degree. By 2013, he began writing the encrypted books, claiming they could improve humanity. In early 2017, he asked his mother for financial help, but she refused to give details. She declined. His cousin Eduardo Veloso, however, gave him 20,000 reais, believing in his project. While his parents were away in March, Bruno locked himself in his room, leaving only to eat. The statue was delivered on March 16th for 10,000 reais. On March 24th, he told his neighbor he was close to finishing his books and wanted to help people in need. 3 days later, he disappeared. Police investigated but could not confirm if he left voluntarily. They soon learned Bruno had help from 2 friends and his cousin, all of whom had contracts for a share of the book profits. One friend was briefly detained for false statements. Police found Bruno's missing furniture in his home along with messages saying they would be rich. Authorities suspected a publicity plan. The case exploded online. A leaked video of his room went viral. Social media groups formed to decode his writings. One had over 10,000 members. Amateur codebreakers joined in. One solved a cipher in 30 minutes. Still, Bruno was missing. Interpol was contacted. Rumors spread that he had gone into a nearby forest. A seamstress reported that he had ordered long tunics before vanishing. A security camera captured him running toward his house on March 28th, but he never went inside. On August 11th, nearly 5 months later, Bruno returned, barefoot, thin, and dehydrated. He never revealed where he had been. He resumed work on his books. The first, released in July, became a bestseller in Brazil's nonfiction category but was criticized for unclear writing. Bruno admitted errors and began revising. In interviews, he denied any publicity stunt. His mother said his only goal was to inspire knowledge. Police closed the case as a planned promotion. Bruno said profits were minimal and the media misrepresented him. Bruno's disappearance began as a mystery, went viral, and ended with even more questions. To this day, he has never said where he went or why. It was August 4th, 1987 in Harlem, New York. Joy White and Carl Tyson rushed their 19-day-old daughter, Carlina White, to Harlem Hospital. She had a fever of 104 degrees and was diagnosed with an infection from swallowing fluid during birth. Doctors placed her on intravenous antibiotics. The young parents were worried, but they had no idea this would be the last time they'd see her for over 2 decades. That night became the first known case of a newborn being taken from a New York City hospital, and years later, Carlina would solve it herself. Between 2:30 and 3:55 in the morning, someone removed Carlina's IV and took her from the hospital. Security cameras were not working, and nurses said they had checked on her only minutes before she was gone. Joy and Carl remembered seeing a woman in a nurse's uniform earlier, who had even helped Carl find a phone. She had been spotted in the hospital for weeks, blending in so well that other nurses thought she worked there. A security guard recalled seeing a woman matching her description leave around 3:30. He hadn't seen a baby, but thought she could have hidden one under her uniform. Her last words to Joy had been strange, telling her that the baby didn't cry for her, but that she cried for the baby. Only later did it seem as if she had been trying to get Joy to leave. Police investigated, even chasing a lead in Baltimore, but nothing came of it. With no photos, DNA, or working cameras, the trail went cold. Carlina grew up just 45 miles away in Bridgeport, Connecticut, under the name Nejra Nettie Nance, raised by Annagetta Ann Petway. Petway had told people she was pregnant in 1987, then returned with a baby after being away for a while. In reality, she had taken Carlina and raised her as her own. Petway had a history of theft, forgery, and other crimes, as well as emotional struggles. Carlina attended school in Bridgeport before she and Petway moved to Atlanta. Over time, Carlina noticed they didn't look alike and that there were no baby photos, birth certificate, or social security number. In 2005, pregnant with her own daughter, Samani, she needed a birth certificate for insurance. Petway gave her one, but officials told her it was fake. When confronted, Petway admitted she wasn't her biological mother, but claimed Carlina had been abandoned by her real mother. Carlina began searching missing persons reports. In 2010, she checked the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website and found a baby photo from 1987 that looked just like her and her daughter. The baby had a birthmark identical to hers. She contacted the center, and with help from Petway's sister, Cassandra Johnson, DNA testing began. Just before Christmas 2010, Joy White and Carl Tyson got an email. Carlina had been found. Their first phone calls were emotional, and Carlina soon flew to New York with her daughter to meet them. A detective later confirmed through DNA that she was Carlina White. In January 2011, Petway turned herself in to the FBI, saying she had taken Carlina after multiple miscarriages. She pleaded guilty in 2012 and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Carl Tyson thought it was too short, saying she should have served 23 years, the time she kept Carlina from them. Petway was released in April 2021. Carlina later asked her parents about a hospital settlement they had received, but most of it was gone. This caused tension and a temporary estrangement, though they reconnected months later. Today, Carlina uses her legal name but goes by Nettie in public. She has spoken about her case at national conferences and remains known as the missing baby who found herself. It was November 12, 1961, in the Northwest Providence Channel of the Bahamas. Aboard the Greek freighter, Captain Theo, Second Officer Nikolaos Spachidakis, noticed a small white speck far off in the water. At first, he thought it was debris, but as the ship drew closer, it became clear. It was an inflatable life raft. On it lay a young girl, barely conscious. Her skin was badly burned from the sun, her lips cracked, and her clothes torn. She had no food, no water, and no shelter. Somehow, she had survived 3.5 days alone at sea. Her name was Terry Jo Dupereau. She was 11 years old. Her story began days earlier. Dr. Arthur Dupereau, an optometrist from Green Bay, Wisconsin, dreamed of taking his family on a tropical sailing trip. By 1961, he had saved enough to try it. He planned a week in the Bahamas with his wife Jean, 14-year-old son Brian, and his daughters, 11-year-old Terry Jo and 7-year-old Renee. They rented a sailboat, the Bluebell, captained by 44-year-old Julian Harvey, a retired Air Force pilot who brought his wife, Mary Dean. They departed Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on November 8th. For 4 days, everything went well. They visited Bimini and Sandy Point, collecting shells and snorkeling. On November 12th, Arthur filed departure papers in Sandy Point, telling an official that it had been a once-in-a-lifetime vacation and that they would be back before Christmas. That night, after dinner, Terry Jo went to bed in her cabin. Renee stayed up with the rest of the family on deck. Hours later, Terry Jo awoke to her brother shouting for help, followed by running footsteps, then silence. When she went to the main cabin, she saw her mother and brother lying motionless. There was blood. Harvey appeared, said nothing, and told her to go back below. Soon after, water began flooding her cabin. Harvey returned, possibly holding her brother's rifle, but left without speaking. Realizing the boat was sinking, Terry Jo went topside and asked if it was going down. Harvey said yes and handed her a rope tied to a dinghy, but she lost her grip and Harvey dove after it. She never saw him again. She untied a small cork life float and slid it into the sea as the Bluebell disappeared. A rope snagged, dragging her underwater, but it snapped, bringing her back to the surface. For the next days, she endured freezing nights, scorching heat, and dehydration. On Tuesday, a red plane passed overhead, but she didn't spot her. That afternoon, porpoises swam beside her for hours, the only comfort she had. By Wednesday, she was hallucinating and drifting in and out of consciousness. On Thursday morning, she opened her eyes to see a massive ship, the Captain Theo. Then she blacked out. Days earlier, another ship had found Harvey drifting in a dinghy with his wife's body. He claimed a storm had damaged the Bluebell, causing a fire that trapped everyone else. His story had holes, but there were no witnesses, until Terry Jo. When Harvey learned she was alive, he appeared surprised. The next day, he was found deceased in a Miami hotel room. From her hospital bed, Terry Jo explained what happened. Investigators determined Harvey had likely ended his wife's life for insurance and killed the Duperots to cover it up. He left Terry Jo on the sinking yacht, assuming she wouldn't survive. But she did. Her rescue photo was published worldwide, and she became known as the Sea Waif. She returned to Green Bay to live with relatives, later changing her name to Terry. In 2010, she told her story in the book Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, saying she believed she survived for a reason. One question still remains: why did Julian Harvey let her live? No one knows.